Welcome to True Echo, where real stories resonate louder than fiction. In today's gripping tale, a young boy faces public humiliation at the hands of a smug police officer. All because he told the truth about his father. But what happens when truth walks onto the scene? Calm, powerful, and undeniable. Stay with us as we unravel the shocking confrontation that flipped the script and reminded everyone that respect isn't asked for, it's earned. It was one of those California afternoons where the sun feels like it's got something to prove, burning extra hot, making every sidewalk shimmer like a sheet of glass. The basketball court in Stockton's East End echoed with the rhythm of bouncing balls, sneakers scraping, and the occasional roar of kids calling, "Yo, I had that." It was a day too ordinary to expect anything dramatic. But for Malik Jordan, age 12, it would be the day everything changed. Malik wasn't built for trouble. He was built for keeping his head down, his shoulders square, and his walk steady, just like his father had taught him. "Walk like you belong, son," his dad always said. Even if nobody else thinks so. And Malik did believe he belonged. He just left the park, his backpack light, a half-melted candy bar tucked into the side pocket, his head filled with dreams of that new video game he was saving up for. His steps were calm, unbothered. That is, until he heard the slow grind of tires on gravel behind him. The police cruiser didn't flash its lights. It didn't hit the siren. It just crept, like a shadow stretching too far on a summer afternoon. Officer Bryce Keeterman leaned out the window, sunglasses lowered just enough to see the scrutiny in his eyes. "Hey you," he called out, too casual to be friendly. "What are you up to?" Malik froze, not because he had something to hide but because he remembered. His father's lessons echoed in his mind louder than the question. "Stay polite. Don't argue. Speak clearly. Hands where they can see." "Just walking home, sir," Malik replied, trying to keep the tension out of his voice. "From the park." Keeterman's voice lost even the thin layer of civility. "Yes, sir." "You got ID?" he asked, stepping out now, one hand grazing his belt. It wasn't a casual move. Malik's stomach flipped. What kid carried ID to the park? "No, sir. But I live just a few blocks away. My dad's home." "Your dad, huh?" Keeterman cut him off with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "What's he do?" Malik didn't hesitate. His pride didn't allow him to. "He's in Special Forces. Army." The moment the words left his mouth, Malik knew it was a mistake, not because it wasn't true, but because Officer Keeterman's laugh came like a slap. A big, belly-deep laugh like Malik had said his dad was Batman. "Special Forces?" Keeterman shook his head. "Kid, you've been watching too many movies." Malik's fists clenched inside his pockets. He wanted to explain. Wanted to talk about the photos in their hallway, the stories his dad barely told, the months he'd been gone on training missions. But he knew it wouldn't matter. Keeterman had already made up his mind. The officer stepped closer now, towering like a bully who found someone too small to fight back. "What's next?" "Your mom's a Navy SEAL?" he snorted. Malik kept his eyes on a crack in the sidewalk. He didn't flinch. He didn't answer. "Where's this Special Forces daddy of yours now?" Keeterman sneered. "At home," Malik murmured, throat dry. "Aha." Keeterman looked over his shoulder at his partner, Officer Dean Harlow, who leaned against the cruiser, arms folded. "You hear that, Dean? We got ourselves a little G.I. Joe here." Dean gave a half smile but didn't respond. Malik swallowed the embarrassment like glass. He pulled out his phone, an old model with a cracked corner, his hands trembling. "I can call him," he said, barely above a whisper. Keeterman rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure. Let's meet this superhero dad of yours." Malik tapped his dad's name and hit call, but his fingers slipped. The phone hit the concrete, face down, a fresh spiderweb of cracks blooming across the screen. He bent slowly, shame tightening in his chest. Then, through the fractured screen, the call went through. 2 rings. Then that voice. Calm. Grounded. Familiar. "Malik, you good, son?" Malik stood taller just a bit. "I'm at the park. They want to talk to you. Stay right there." "I'm coming," Nathaniel Jordan said. No questions. No panic. Just certainty. Malik held the phone up for Officer Keeterman, who waved it off. "You can tell him yourself when he gets here," he said, strolling back to the cruiser like nothing was happening. Minutes passed like hours. The sun hung heavy. Malik stood alone while the officers cracked jokes about golf and fishing like a child wasn't burning with humiliation 20 feet away. "You think he even has a dad?" Keeterman muttered. Malik bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. Then, something shifted. A sleek black Ford Explorer glided to a stop by the curb, quiet, controlled. No screech. No rush. The door opened. Out stepped a man who didn't need to raise his voice to make the air still. Nathaniel Jordan wasn't in uniform. He didn't need to be. His posture, his walk, the intensity in his eyes, they said enough. It was the kind of presence that made people stop what they were doing without knowing why. Dean Harlow straightened like someone had tightened a string in his back. "Oh, Bryce?" he said under his breath. "What now?" Keterman snapped. Dean nodded toward the man walking toward them. Slowly. Calmly. When Keterman turned, the look on his face melted. His smirk vanished like smoke in wind. Because the man approaching wasn't just some dad. He was the storm they never saw coming. Nathaniel Jordan didn't need to make a scene. His very presence rearranged the atmosphere. The kids who'd been riding by on bikes slowed down. The parents across the park glanced over, their conversations faltering mid-sentence. Something about the way he walked, deliberate, anchored, unbothered, made everyone pay attention. Not loud. Not aggressive. But commanding. Like someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side with his integrity intact. Malik felt his lungs expand for the first time in minutes. His dad wasn't wearing combat boots or camouflage. Just a fitted black t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. But somehow, in the heat of that moment, he looked more like authority than both officers combined. He didn't speak until he stood a few feet from Officer Keterman. His eyes didn't flicker. His voice didn't rise. "Is there a reason my son's being detained?" The question landed like a brick through glass. Keterman opened his mouth. Closed it. His sunglasses suddenly felt too dark, too silly. He pushed them up onto his head and cleared his throat. "Well, sir," he began, "we received a report of suspicious activity in the area. Just doing a routine check." Nathaniel didn't blink. "You got a call about a 12-year-old walking home from the park." Silence followed. Dean Harlow shifted uncomfortably, looking away toward the sidewalk like he wished it would open up and swallow him whole. Malik, still clutching his cracked phone, didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His father's presence had filled the space with something heavier than anger, accountability. Nathaniel looked Malik over with one quick, practiced glance. The kind of once-over that saw more than it should have. The slight tremble in his son's hands. The shattered screen. The tight set of his shoulders. All of it, absorbed in an instant. Turning back to Keterman, Nathaniel asked again, quieter this time. "Name?" The officer hesitated. "Officer Bryce Keterman. Stockton PD." Nathaniel's jaw flexed. Not clenched, not flared, just one subtle shift of muscle. He stood relaxed, but with a coiled steadiness that hinted he could move faster than any man in uniform if he needed to. "Well, Officer Keterman," Nathaniel said, his voice even, "you're about 2 minutes away from a very different kind of conversation." Keterman straightened, trying to find the edge in his own voice again. "Sir, there's no need for threats." "I'm not threatening you," Nathaniel interrupted, his tone smooth as glass. "I'm educating you." That line stopped everyone. Malik saw it in his father's eyes, that razor-sharp blend of calm and consequence. It was the same look he gave when Malik had once tried to lie about a bad grade. But this wasn't a parent scolding a child. This was a soldier reminding someone that rank in the real world isn't about a badge. Nathaniel reached into his back pocket, slowly, methodically, and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open, not to a driver's license, not to a family photo, but to a laminated military ID. Dean Harlow leaned in and stiffened instantly. His lips parted like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Keterman squinted, then frowned as recognition hit him like a slap. "Master Sergeant Nathaniel Jordan, United States Army Special Forces," Nathaniel said almost as an afterthought. Then he tucked it away like it was nothing, like it wasn't the kind of credential that could clear a room in the Pentagon. "You don't get to make my son feel like a criminal because you don't believe who his family is," he said softly, but with a blade under the words. "You don't get to humiliate a child because your ego can't handle his truth." For the first time since pulling up, Officer Keterman was silent. Fully silent. Not because he had nothing to say, because he had nothing to hide behind anymore. No sarcasm, no laugh, no smirk. Nathaniel took one half step back, tilted his head slightly, and said, "Malik." Malik didn't hesitate. He moved, fast, like gravity had shifted and was pulling him toward his father. As soon as he reached him, Nathaniel's hand came to rest on his shoulder, solid, grounding, like a shield had just dropped between him and the world. They turned to leave. Malik's heart was pounding, but not with fear anymore. With something else. Something like pride. Like justice had just shown up in blue jeans. They were almost to the car when Keterman's voice cracked through the air again. loud, defensive, trying to reclaim ground that was already lost. "You know, not everyone's impressed by a uniform," he barked. Nathaniel stopped. Didn't turn right away. His fingers on Malik's shoulder tensed slightly, firm like an anchor keeping him grounded. Then he slowly turned. Just enough so Keterman could see his face. "You think this is about uniforms?" he said, his voice so low it cut through the heat like cold steel. "This is about a grown man thinking it's funny to humiliate a child for telling the truth." There was movement around them now. Quiet. Intent. Parents pretending not to listen while not missing a word. Teenagers frozen with their phones out. Joggers slowing to a near stop. Nathaniel took a step forward. Not threatening. Just present. The kind of presence that needed no explanation. "My son is 12, he said. "Old enough to know when he's being mocked. Old enough to know when a man is hiding cowardice behind a badge." Keterman's jaw twitched. "We have procedures," he mumbled, eyes flicking toward Dean. "You don't have procedures to embarrass children to protect your own pride," Nathaniel replied, still calm. "You listen. You observe. And you act like you have sense." That last line came like a final nail. And then, finally, Dean Harlow stepped forward. He didn't make eye contact with Nathaniel. Just put a hand on Keterman's arm. "Bryce," he said low and strained. "Let it go." And somehow it wasn't a suggestion. It was a plea. For one long breath the world held still. Then Keterman exhaled through his nose like a bull deciding not to charge. Nathaniel didn't look away. Didn't gloat. Just turned back toward Malik, giving his shoulder a small, reassuring squeeze. "You all right, son?" he asked, voice low now, just for him. Malik nodded quickly, his throat still tight. "Yeah," he managed. Nathaniel opened the door to the passenger seat. Malik climbed in without a word. He placed his broken phone in the cup holder like it was something sacred. As his father walked around the car, Malik looked out the window, back at the two officers standing awkwardly in the heat. But the one thing he couldn't stop thinking about was how everything had changed the moment his dad showed up. Not because he yelled. Not because he threatened. But because truth had weight. And today, it walked on 2 feet and wore silence like armor. The drive home wasn't long, but the silence inside the black Ford Explorer felt stretched, like the interior of the car was holding its breath. Malik stared out the window, watching the streets slide past in a blur of cracked sidewalks, picket fences, and the occasional barking dog behind a gate. The sun still hung high, throwing shadows that seemed too sharp, too unforgiving. His fingers toyed with the cracked phone screen in his lap, tracing the jagged lines like they were fault lines in his own chest. Nathaniel didn't speak at first. His eyes were on the road, hands calm on the steering wheel, posture still perfectly upright. Malik snuck a glance at his dad's face, serious, unreadable but not angry. That somehow made the weight inside Malik's chest even heavier. He expected fury. Expected a lecture. Instead there was just silence. The kind that listened more than it judged. Finally, just as they turned onto their street, Nathaniel spoke. "You did everything right." Malik blinked. "Didn't feel like it." Nathaniel nodded slowly as if he'd been waiting for that answer. "That's because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good. Doesn't always change how wrong others act." They pulled into the driveway, the tires crunching softly over gravel. The engine clicked off. The sun beat down on the hood, but inside the air had cooled, not just from the AC but from something else. From the unspoken knowledge that something had just shifted in Malik's world. Nathaniel turned in his seat, one arm resting casually over the steering wheel. "Listen to me, Malik." The boy looked up, met his father's eyes. "There are people who will try to shrink you," Nathaniel said. "They'll laugh, doubt, mock, because they can't see past their own limits. But that's not your burden to carry." Malik looked down again, fidgeting with the broken phone. "You don't lie," Nathaniel continued. "You don't back down. You don't get smaller just to make someone else feel bigger." The words settled into Malik's chest like bricks being laid into a foundation. Solid. Lasting. "I just wanted to tell the truth," Malik said softly. "I wasn't trying to start anything. And you did." Nathaniel's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened with pride. "You stood in the truth. That's more than most adults know how to do." Malik swallowed hard, the sting behind his eyes rising again. But this time it wasn't humiliation, it was something like relief. Like being seen. "I guess we need to fix this," he mumbled, holding up the broken phone. Nathaniel chuckled, low and warm. A real laugh this time. "Yeah. But the important stuff? That's not broken." They got out of the car, the door shutting behind them with a satisfying thud. Inside the house, the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and wood polish hit Malik's senses. The living room looked the same, nothing had changed. But Malik had. Even in the way he walked to the couch, backpack slipping from his shoulder, there was a new kind of gravity. Nathaniel set his keys on the counter and opened the freezer. "Ice cream?" he asked. Malik blinked. "Huh. Hard conversations go down better with Rocky Road," Nathaniel said, pulling out 2 bowls. "It's an old military secret." Malik cracked a small smile. "That classified too?" "Very," Nathaniel grinned, and the room lightened. They sat at the kitchen table, father and son, eating ice cream as the afternoon sun painted the floor in golden slats. It was quiet for a while. No TV, no radio, just spoons clinking gently against ceramic. Then Nathaniel said something that Malik would carry for the rest of his life. "You don't have to yell to be heard." Malik looked up, puzzled. "Today," Nathaniel continued, "I didn't raise my voice once. Didn't swing, didn't threaten. But they heard me." Malik nodded slowly. "You see," Nathaniel said, "power isn't always in volume. It's in presence. In truth. In how you carry yourself when the world wants you to fold." Malik let the words settle again. Let them sink past his skin and into his bones. He understood now why his dad never bragged. Why the medals on the wall stayed in the hallway, not the living room. Why the stories were always told in fragments, not boasts. Because real strength didn't need to be loud. That night, Nathaniel sat in his office with the door half open while Malik did his homework at the kitchen table. The silence between them was no longer heavy, it was peaceful, grounding. But outside the walls of their house, the story had already begun to ripple. 2 parents at the park had recorded the interaction on their phones. Not the whole thing, but enough. Enough to show a small boy standing quietly while a grown man in uniform laughed at him. Enough to capture the moment Nathaniel arrived and the shift in power that followed. Enough to make people uncomfortable. And by Sunday morning, those clips had already started spreading across neighborhood social media groups. By Sunday afternoon, someone had filed a formal complaint. But Malik didn't know that yet. He spent his Sunday helping his dad wash the car, the soap suds clinging to their arms, their conversation light and easy. For the first time in a while he didn't feel small. He felt seen. That evening while they were cleaning up, Nathaniel's phone buzzed on the counter. He wiped his hands on a towel and glanced at the screen. He didn't say anything. Just stared at the message for a moment, then pocketed the phone. Malik noticed. "Something wrong?" Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Nope. Just the world catching up." And though he didn't elaborate, Malik somehow knew. Knew that what had happened at the park wasn't over. That the truth had legs. That it had begun to walk beyond that sidewalk crack, beyond Officer Keeterman's smirk, beyond the broken phone. And it was only just getting started. Monday morning in Stockton always started with noise. Buses hissing at stops, early risers jogging with earbuds in, and the soft roar of traffic stretching into downtown. But at the Stockton Police Department, things were quieter than usual. Inside a windowless office, Bryce Keeterman sat stiffly across from his captain, fingers interlaced tightly on his lap, trying to keep his knee from bouncing. The captain, a gray-haired man with eyes that had seen too many excuses, tapped on the spacebar of his keyboard and turned the monitor around. "This is from Saturday," he said, not bothering to hide the disappointment in his voice. "You want to explain?" On the screen was the video. Not even 2 minutes long, but damning. Malik standing there, shoulders square but small in the frame. Keeterman towering above him, laughing like he was on a late-night talk show. Then the arrival. Nathaniel Jordan, calm and composed, stepping into frame with the quiet precision of someone trained not to waste a single movement. Keeterman shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I was just..." "You mocked a child," the captain cut in, not raising his voice but somehow louder than a shout. "In public. In uniform. On video. I didn't know who he was. That's the problem. You didn't care who he was." Keeterman sat back, his chest tightening. "I was following procedure." "No," the captain interrupted again, "you were following your pride." Outside that office life went on as usual. Officers signed in, phones rang, and the world turned. But inside, Keeterman's world had started to tilt. And there was no pretending it hadn't. He was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Dean Harlow, who had stood by silently during the incident, wasn't off the hook either. He got a formal warning in his file, an asterisk next to his name that would follow him like a shadow. Meanwhile, back at home, Malik stood by the front window, watching the morning light dance through the tree branches. His backpack was already slung over one shoulder, and the repaired phone, now sporting a new screen thanks to Nathaniel's late-night soldering work, sat neatly on the entryway table. "You ready?" Nathaniel asked, keys in hand. Malik nodded. But something lingered in his eyes. They got in the car, the radio playing something soft in the background. A local host talking about weather and community updates. Then the tone of the broadcast shifted. We have a developing story this morning out of Stockton, the radio host said. A local police officer is under investigation following a viral video showing an encounter with a 12-year-old boy that some are calling racially charged and deeply inappropriate. Malik turned the volume down. Nathaniel didn't speak. He just kept driving. Dad. Malik said after a while. Yeah. Was it racial? Nathaniel inhaled through his nose slowly. He didn't answer right away. I can't tell you what was in that officer's heart, he said finally. But I can tell you what was in his actions. And? Malik pressed gently. He saw a black boy walking home and decided that was enough to stop him. He didn't see a child. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look for truth, he looked for power. Malik looked down at his hands. Would it have gone different if I said you were a teacher or something? Nathaniel chuckled softly. Son, I could have been the president of the United States. That wouldn't have stopped him. Malik frowned. Then what's the point of being special forces if people still treat me like I'm lying? Nathaniel turned to him at a red light, gaze steady. You don't serve to be seen. You serve because it's right. Same goes for truth. Same goes for dignity. They don't always get applause, but they don't disappear just because someone laughs. Malik nodded slowly. That's hard. Yeah, Nathaniel agreed. It is. When they arrived at school, the energy was different. A few kids stared. A few whispered. Jaden, his best friend, jogged up as he got out of the car. Yo, Jaden said wide-eyed. That was your dad? Malik nodded. Man, Jaden laughed in disbelief. My mom saw that video and she said your dad walks like God told him to slow down. Malik cracked a smile. He kinda does. They laughed together for the first time since the weekend and it felt good, like scraping the rust off something you didn't know had been sitting still for too long. Inside the school, however, things weren't quite as light. Mrs. Reeves, his homeroom teacher, gave him a long look as he walked in. Not unkind but searching. Like she was connecting dots that hadn't been there before. During third period, the principal called him into the office. Malik's heart thumped against his ribs, but when he walked in, it wasn't a reprimand waiting for him. There was a seat. And a smile. Malik, Principal Vega said, we just want to check in. See how you're doing. I'm okay, Malik said automatically. She nodded. I saw the video. I saw how you handled yourself. Malik shifted in his seat, unsure what to say. You were brave, Vega said. Come. That's not easy. Thanks, Malik mumbled. I just wanted you to hear that from someone inside this building too. It wasn't much. Just a few sentences. But to Malik it felt like something new, like a weight he didn't know he was carrying had lifted just a little. Back home that evening, Nathaniel had pulled out a box from the hall closet. It was old, lined with dust and memories. Inside were patches, medals, photos, pieces of a life Malik only knew in fragments. Thought you might want to see what truth looks like when nobody's laughing, Nathaniel said, handing him a coin. Malik turned it over in his palm, heavy, etched with the insignia of a unit he couldn't pronounce but now understood mattered. You keep that, Nathaniel said. So next time someone doubts you, you won't. And Malik held onto that coin like it was armor. Because in a world that tries to tell boys like him what they're not, that little piece of metal was proof of what he was. By Tuesday morning, the story had left Stockton and was quietly climbing into national awareness. It started with a post from a community page, this is what kids go through just for walking home. Then a retweet from a local journalist. Then a blog with the headline, 12-year-old humiliated by police. His dad's response silences the crowd. By the time Nathaniel checked his phone at 7 a.m., there were over 50 messages. Some from former unit members. Some from strangers. A few from reporters. One from a colonel he hadn't spoken to in years. He ignored most of them. At least for now. Downstairs, Malik sat at the kitchen table, cereal soggy in the bowl, eyes scanning a tablet screen. The video was there, front and center on every social platform. Dozens of different captions but always the same story. He looked up as Nathaniel walked in. Everyone's talking about it. Nathaniel set down his coffee mug. Yeah, they are. Is that good? Nathaniel gave a long, slow exhale. Depends on what they're saying. Malik turned the screen toward him. Most of them are saying you were right. Nathaniel didn't smile. He didn't bask in it. Because this wasn't about being right. This was about something far deeper, and far more exhausting. Let them say what they want, Nathaniel said finally. What matters is how we live after it. Malik chewed the inside of his cheek. I didn't think telling the truth would turn into all this. Sometimes the truth makes people uncomfortable, Nathaniel replied. And uncomfortable people make noise. At school things had shifted again. The same classmates who might have ignored Malik before now greeted him with nods or quiet admiration. Even the teachers seemed to hold longer eye contact, like they were re-evaluating him through a new lens. But Malik didn't feel taller. Didn't feel braver. He felt watched. During lunch, Jaden sat down beside him with a look of unease. Bro, he whispered. You see what that dude from Channel 4 said? Malik frowned. No. Jaden pulled up a post on his phone. It showed a cropped frame of Nathaniel standing calmly in front of Officer Keeterman. The caption read, Is this the discipline we need more of in policing? A special forces vet shows how to handle conflict without chaos. Malik blinked. They're turning my dad into a meme? More like a movement, Jaden said. Malik looked down at the phone. There were new hashtags. Hashtag stand like Nathaniel, hashtag silent respect, hashtag walk with truth. Hundreds of thousands of views. He wasn't sure how he felt about any of it. That night, Nathaniel's phone buzzed again. This time he didn't ignore it. It was a call from the Department of Defense Public Affairs Office. Sergeant Jordan, the voice said professionally. We've been made aware of your encounter with local law enforcement. While you're not obligated to speak on it publicly, we've had several media inquiries and are prepared to support you should you decide to make a statement. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. Then said only, Thank you. I'll consider it. He hung up and stared out the kitchen window for a moment, the light from the porch casting long shadows across the lawn. Malik walked in quietly, his voice tentative. You're thinking about doing it, aren't you? Nathaniel turned, mildly surprised. Doing what? Talking about it? Going on the news? Making a speech or something? Nathaniel shook his head. I'm not interested in being anyone's symbol, son. I'm interested in you. And how you walk through this world after everything that's happened. Malik looked away then back. But what if it helps other kids like me? That stopped Nathaniel. Because buried inside that one question was everything he had tried to teach, not by words but by example. The power of presence, the strength of stillness, the echo of quiet courage. You think it would help? He asked. Malik nodded. Nathaniel paused for a long time. Then maybe I will. Across town, Officer Keeterman sat alone in his apartment. The blinds were drawn. The TV was on mute. He stared at his phone like it might jump at him. He'd been suspended. Technically with pay, but that felt more like a form of punishment than a privilege now. Everywhere he turned, his name was in someone's mouth, online, in print, in whispers at the department. There had even been a knock at his door earlier that day. A young black man, maybe mid-20s, wearing a postal uniform. When Keeterman opened the door, the man didn't speak. Just looked at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he handed him a certified letter and walked away. Inside the envelope was a notice. Internal Affairs Review, scheduled interview. Required attendance. His hands trembled as he folded the letter back. He wasn't used to being on this side of the table. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure how to wear the uniform that had once made him feel untouchable. The next morning, Nathaniel stood in the living room, dressed in a simple navy button-up shirt and dark jeans. A camera crew from a national news network had arrived. Not a massive production, just a two-person crew, soft lights, and a single microphone clipped discreetly to his collar. The reporter, a black woman named Cameron Ellis, introduced herself with quiet confidence and kind eyes. She'd seen the clip, had even replayed it in slow motion. You didn't raise your voice, she'd said when they first spoke on the phone. That's what struck me. Now, as the interview began, Nathaniel sat with his hands folded calmly in front of him. I'm not here to stir outrage, he said. I'm here to make a point. And that is? Cameron asked. That dignity isn't optional. Especially not for children. Especially not for black children. The interview was powerful without theatrics. Emotional without manipulation. And when it aired that night, something shifted again. The comments section flooded with support. Veterans, parents, police officers, teachers, even strangers who had never heard of Stockton before. This man defines what leadership looks like. The calmest storm I've ever seen. More men like this. Please. Back at home, Malik watched the segment from the couch, knees pulled to his chest. And for the first time since Saturday, he saw his dad not just as his protector, but as someone the whole world could learn from. Not because he shouted, but because he didn't have to. Wednesday came with a strange stillness, like the city was holding its breath. The interview had aired less than 12 hours ago, but the ripples were already turning into waves. Malik felt it the moment he stepped onto the school campus. Whispers followed him, not malicious, not mocking, just heavy, curious, charged. Even the teachers looked different. Not in the way they dressed, but in the way they regarded him. Some smiled a little longer. Others placed a gentle hand on his shoulder in passing. But it all felt too much. Too loud for a boy who'd only told the truth and didn't want to become a symbol for it. In second period, Mrs. Callahan, his English teacher, paused mid-lesson and looked directly at him. "Malik," she said softly, "if you ever want to write about your experience for class, or for yourself, you're welcome to." Malik nodded politely, but inside he wasn't sure. What would he even write? "Dear world, I told the truth and someone laughed. My dad showed up and now you care." No, not yet. At lunch, Jaden slid into the seat across from him. "You know they're calling your dad the realest man in America, right?" Malik sighed. "Yeah, I heard. And there's a whole Reddit thread about the way he turned around when that cop made that 'not everyone's impressed by uniforms' comment. They're turning it into a GIF. 1,000 GIFs." They both laughed, but Malik's smile faded fast. "It's weird though." "What is?" "That people need a video to believe the truth." Jaden fell quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, that's messed up." Back at home, Nathaniel sat at his dining room table, his laptop open. The inbox was still exploding. Messages from schools asking him to speak. Podcasts offering interviews. Even a few letters from families saying their kids had been through the same thing, and now, finally, they had a story that made them feel seen. But Nathaniel wasn't chasing viral moments. He was thinking bigger. He reached out to a friend from his military days, Khalid Monroe, now a community liaison officer in Oakland. The two hadn't spoken in over a year, but their bond hadn't faded. When Nathaniel told him what had happened, Khalid didn't respond with shock. "I believe it," he said. "It's not new." "I want to do something about it," Nathaniel said. "You already did." "No," Nathaniel replied. "That was for my son. I want to do something for everyone else's." There was a pause. Then Khalid said, "Come up next week. Let's talk." Later that evening, Malik stood in his room, staring at his reflection. He wasn't taller. His voice hadn't changed. He still had the same scar on his eyebrow from when he tried to ride his bike with no hands. But the world had changed around him. He picked up the challenge coin his dad gave him. It was cool in his palm, dense with weight and meaning. He heard footsteps in the hallway, then a soft knock. Nathaniel pushed the door open. "You okay?" Malik nodded. "Yeah." Nathaniel stepped in, leaned against the doorway. "You've been quiet." I don't want to be a thing," Malik said. "You know? Like, everyone keeps treating me like I did something amazing. But I didn't." "You did." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "You did something I taught you to do. And then you stood still when it would have been easier to run. That counts for a lot." Malik looked down. "Still doesn't feel like enough." Nathaniel stepped forward, knelt to Malik's eye level. "You don't measure your worth by how loud the world claps. You measure it by how true you stayed to yourself when it wasn't easy." Malik nodded slowly. "And besides," Nathaniel added with a smirk, "you've got better posture than half my unit had at your age." Malik grinned. "That's because you make me practice every morning." They laughed. The kind of laugh that settles nerves and builds bridges. Later that night, as Malik lay in bed, the city outside humming into stillness, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hey Malik. My name's Brian. I saw your story. Same thing happened to me last year in Missouri. Just wanted to say thanks for being brave. You made me feel less alone." Malik stared at the message for a long time. Then he replied, "You're not alone. We walk the same." He put the phone down and turned over, the glow of the screen fading behind him, but something new glowing inside. He didn't need the world to see him. He just needed to know someone else did. Thursday dawned with a cooler breeze than the days before. The kind that slid through open windows and hinted at a change not just in weather, but in something deeper, like a storm had passed and left the air sharper, clearer. Nathaniel stood outside on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood stretch awake. Lawn sprinklers clicked on. Delivery vans trundled by. The world continued, unchanged on the surface, but he knew better. The shift was subtle but real. Respect, once withheld, now came with cautious eyes and polite nods. Neighbors who never spoke more than a grunt now said, "Good morning, Sergeant," like they'd known him all along. He didn't care about the new attention. He cared about what it meant for Malik. Inside, Malik sat at the kitchen table, staring at his homework but not really seeing it. His thoughts were in 100 places. His phone, his classmates, the look on Officer Keterman's face when his dad arrived, the moment he realized silence could speak louder than shouting. The night before, he had received 5 more messages from kids across the country. Some short, some long, but all said the same thing in different ways. "I thought I was alone." That morning he opened his inbox and saw one from a boy named Elijah in Baltimore. "I never told anyone my dad's in the military. I thought they'd laugh. After what you did, I told my whole class. They didn't laugh. They listened." Malik read it twice, then a third time. Then he closed the screen and just sat with it. There was something bigger growing from this, bigger than embarrassment, bigger than that sidewalk moment, bigger even than his dad. Nathaniel returned inside and saw the look on Malik's face. Thoughtful. A little overwhelmed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Malik nodded. Then after a beat, I think this matters." Nathaniel pulled out a chair across from him. "It always mattered. I think we should do something with it." Nathaniel leaned back, watching his son with quiet interest. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know yet. Something for kids like me. Like Elijah. A place where we can talk. Share stuff." Nathaniel smiled. "You want to lead something?" "I want it to exist," Malik said. "Even if I don't lead it. I just want it to help." Nathaniel nodded. "That's the start of something real, son." And it was. That afternoon after school they sat down together and brainstormed. Names, ideas, goals. Malik wanted a space, digital, maybe even physical someday, where military kids, black kids, and kids who felt unseen could feel like they weren't the only ones carrying silence like armor. He wanted it to be called Stand Tall. A place for kids who've been laughed at, to remember who they are. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and shook Malik's hand. "Let's build it." At the Stockton Police Department, the mood had shifted into damage control. Internal Affairs had begun their review. Keterman sat in a cold room across from a panel, a camera recording his every word. "I didn't intend to cause harm," he said stiffly. "You mocked a child," the senior investigator replied. "Repeatedly. Publicly. While wearing a badge." Keterman's jaw tightened. "I didn't think he was telling the truth." "That's not your job. Your job is to protect and serve. Not judge." He left the station that day feeling smaller than he ever had. His badge was still technically his, but its weight had changed. Meanwhile, Nathaniel made good on his promise. That weekend he drove to Oakland to meet Khalid Monroe, his old military friend now working with City Outreach. They met at a community center tucked between 2 apartment blocks, a place where kids dribbled basketballs and flip-flops and murals of civil rights leaders stretched across cracked brick walls. Khalid embraced him the moment they met. "You sure you want to get involved in all this?" he asked, eyes scanning the center like he was seeing more than a building. Nathaniel nodded. "It's time." They walked through the halls, talking logistics, programs, mentorship possibilities. Nathaniel wanted to build something grounded, not another viral moment but a lasting resource. A program that combined the discipline of the military with the emotional intelligence kids needed now more than ever. Khalid was on board. "We'll start small," he said. "Pilot it here. Then maybe Stockton. Then who knows?" As they parted, Khalid clapped him on the back. "I've always said, you weren't built for war. You were built for peace that stands tall." Back home, Malik had already begun drafting messages to his new network. The kids who had messaged him from across the country. He asked what they needed, what they were scared of, what they wanted to say but didn't know how. The responses were raw. Real. "I don't know how to talk about race with my friends. I get followed around in stores. My dad's in Iraq and people still treat me like I'm not American. I want to feel safe." Malik copied every message into a notebook. Then added his own at the top of the first page. "We are not small. Even when they try to make us feel that way." Later that night, Nathaniel found him asleep at his desk, the notebook open beneath his arms. He didn't wake him. Just tucked a blanket around his shoulders and whispered, "Stand tall, son. You already are." By the time the second week rolled around, Stand Tall wasn't just a name scribbled in a notebook. It was a live website, simple but powerful, launched quietly with the help of one of Nathaniel's tech-savvy friends from his last deployment. The homepage was clean, a dark silhouette of a child standing against the sunset, the words "You are not invisible" underneath. There were tabs for stories, letters, resources, and start here. And the messages started flowing in. From Texas. From Florida. From military bases overseas. Kids who had never met Malik, who didn't know his school or his street or his favorite cereal, but knew what it felt like to be doubted. To be small. To be silenced. Each story was raw. Some only a few lines, others paragraphs long. They searched my backpack while I was walking home. Said I fit a description. I was wearing my school ID around my neck. I tried to tell my teacher about the bullying. She told me not to be sensitive. They said my dad couldn't really be in the Navy. Said we looked too poor. Malik read each one with a mix of sadness and a growing sense of purpose. These weren't just stories, they were echoes of what he had lived. And now he was helping shape a space where they could be heard. One night he asked Nathaniel, "Do you think people will still care about this a month from now? When it's not trending?" Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "The people who matter will. That's who you're doing it for." But he understood the fear. The way public interest came in like a wave and receded just as quickly. How easy it was for stories, real human heavy stories, to get buried beneath the next headline. That weekend, Nathaniel agreed to appear on a town hall segment hosted by a local news station. Not just as the man from the viral video, but as a father, a soldier, and a citizen. The room was packed with parents, students, local law enforcement, and community leaders. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Cameron Ellis, the same reporter who had interviewed him at home, was moderating the panel. She opened with a simple question. "Sergeant Jordan, what do you want people to take away from all this?" Nathaniel leaned into the mic. "That silence is not the absence of strength. And that respect isn't owed, it's earned." There was a murmur of agreement. Heads nodding. Pens scribbling notes. "But also," he continued, "that accountability doesn't mean hatred. It means growth. We can criticize without dehumanizing." Across the room, someone asked the inevitable, "What about the officer? Do you think he should be fired?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. But he answered with clarity. "I think he should learn. I think he should sit across from kids like my son and hear their stories. And then ask himself if his badge means power or responsibility." The room went quiet. Malik, watching from home with his mom, who had flown in from her deployment just days earlier, felt something in his chest swell. Not pride in the viral moment or even in the standing ovation that came minutes later, but in the fact that his dad wasn't fighting back with fire. He was planting roots. Meanwhile, Officer Keterman wasn't fired. Not yet. But he was reassigned. Temporarily relieved of patrol duty and placed in mandatory retraining. Sensitivity workshops. Community engagement sessions. Public relations carefully written and delicately worded. None of it made the heat go away. At night, he stared at his ceiling fan and tried to make sense of how fast it had all unraveled. It wasn't just the video. It was that everyone had seen it. Worse, everyone had felt it. And when he finally sat in a restorative justice circle, a small room with folding chairs and laminated ground rules tacked to the wall, he saw something he wasn't prepared for. The face of a child who looked just like Malik, sitting quietly with his own father, staring at him with wide, wary eyes. And in that moment something cracked inside Keterman. Not because he felt sorry for himself, but because he knew, deep down, he had become the very thing his badge was supposed to protect people from. Back in Stockton, Stand Tall hosted its first digital roundtable. 10 kids from across the country. One moderator, Malik. They shared stories, laughed nervously, got quiet when the heavy stuff surfaced. But they stayed. They didn't log off. At the end, Malik said, "You guys are the reason I didn't shrink when it was easier." And one girl from Alabama replied, "And now we won't either." When the call ended, Malik sat back, staring at the ceiling. Nathaniel walked by the room, peeked in. "How'd it go?" he asked. Malik smiled for real. "It went." Nathaniel chuckled. "Sounds about right." But he knew better. It hadn't just gone. It had begun. The following Monday arrived not with noise but with momentum. Stand Tall had officially crossed 50,000 site visits in under 2 weeks. Major blogs, educational sites, and even parenting forums were beginning to share the initiative, often attaching the now iconic freeze frame of Nathaniel standing between his son and 2 officers. But now the story had grown beyond that single moment. It wasn't just about a father defending his son, it was about a generation reclaiming space they'd been denied for far too long. At school, Malik's life was a strange mix of ordinary and extraordinary. He still had homework. He still hated math tests. He still tripped going upstairs sometimes. But between classes, students stopped him, not just to praise but to ask. How did you stay so calm? What made you speak up? Can I help with stand tall? It was overwhelming. But for the first time, Malik didn't shrink under the weight. He stood in it. And with every question, every moment of shared truth, his spine straightened a little more. That afternoon, he walked into his guidance counselor's office. Miss Jackson looked up from her desk, surprised. Everything okay, Malik? He nodded. I was wondering if we could start a club here. Like a real one. A stand tall chapter. She smiled instantly. Absolutely. I've been waiting for you to ask. By the end of the week, flyers were posted around the halls. Malik's name was listed under founder and student lead. The first meeting filled an entire classroom, and not just with black students. There were kids from all backgrounds. Kids who had felt overlooked, misunderstood, underestimated. Malik opened with a story. His story. But then he stepped back. This space isn't about me, he said. It's about all of us. That same week, Nathaniel received an invitation from the Department of Defense to speak at a leadership symposium on ethics and public service. He'd declined speaking events before, but this one was different. It wasn't about exposure. It was about change from within. At the event, he stood before an audience of officers, commanders, civilians, and cadets. My son was humiliated because someone thought authority gave them permission to doubt his truth, he said. But the real failure wasn't just in the mockery. It was in the silence around it. He paused. Let the room breathe. Leadership isn't control. It's character. And if you can't recognize dignity in a child, you've already failed to serve your country. The room was silent. Listening. Not because he demanded it, but because they knew they had to. Afterward, a young lieutenant approached him. Sir, he said. I used to think strength came from force. You made me realize it comes from restraint. Nathaniel nodded. That's where it starts. Meanwhile, Officer Bryce Keeterman sat in a small community forum hosted by the local NAACP. It wasn't mandatory, but after everything he knew showing up mattered more than staying hidden. He didn't speak at first. Just listened. To parents. To teachers. To kids. At one point, a young man raised his hand and asked him directly, what would you say to Malik Jordan if he were here right now? The room went still. Keeterman took a breath. For once, not to prepare a defense, but to lower one. I'd say. I was wrong, he said. Not just in what I assumed, but in how I acted when the truth was uncomfortable. And I'd tell him I'm sorry. The words didn't fix everything. But they weren't empty either. On a quiet Saturday morning, 2 weeks after everything began, Malik and Nathaniel returned to the same park. The same sidewalk. The same stretch of pavement where it all started. Malik held a fresh basketball in his hand. Nathaniel carried a thermos of coffee. They sat on the bench together watching a few kids shoot hoops under the warming sun. You remember what I told you the day it happened? Nathaniel asked. Keep your head up. Shoulders back. Walk like you belong. Nathaniel nodded. You did more than that, son. You reminded everyone that you do. Malik dribbled the ball once. It still hurts sometimes. Thinking about how he laughed at me. It'll sting, Nathaniel said. But the truth you stood in? That'll outlive the sting. A kid from the court jogged over. About Malik's age. Tall, lanky, nervous. Hey, he said breathless. You're that kid, right? From Stand Tall. Malik looked at his dad. Then back at the boy. Yeah, I guess I am. You want to shoot around? The boy asked. Malik smiled. Sure. As they ran toward the court, Nathaniel leaned back on the bench, letting the sun warm his shoulders. He watched his son dribble. Belong. Not because the world gave him permission, but because he had already claimed it. That evening, Malik sat at his desk with the windows open, letting in the hum of streetlights and distant barking dogs. The day had felt full, of sunlight, of laughter, of movement. But now, in the hush of twilight, it all settled around him like a quiet reminder of just how far he had come. The cracked phone that started it all now sat in a shadow box on his shelf, next to his dad's challenge coin and a printout of the very first message he received from a kid who said, "You made me feel less alone." Each item was a fragment of the story, not just of what happened, but of what it became. He scrolled through the latest updates on Stand Tall. A middle school in Atlanta had started a chapter. So had one in Denver. Teachers were emailing to request permission to use parts of Malik's original story as part of their social studies lessons on civic leadership and racial justice. An art teacher from Oregon had mailed in sketches of the now iconic moment, Nathaniel standing tall, calm, unwavering between his son and the world. Each time Malik saw his dad drawn like that, Like a symbol, like a statue, he smiled, but part of him winced too. Because he knew the truth wasn't in the still frame. It was in everything behind it. The years. The warnings. The quiet drills at home. The way Nathaniel always spoke in that even voice, not because he lacked emotion, but because he knew too well what people heard when black men got loud. There had been an email earlier that day from Officer Dean Harlow. Read. Malik, I should have said something that day. I didn't laugh like Keterman, but I stood there. And that's just as bad. I've watched your interviews. I've read about Stand Tall. You're the kind of man I wish I had been at your age. And I hope you know, you changed more than just the people around you. You changed the people who were supposed to protect you. I'm sorry. Officer Dean Harlow. Malik had stared at the message for a long time. Then he replied with just 2 words. Thank you. Because forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing not to carry the weight for someone else's mistake any longer. In the living room, Nathaniel sat with his wife, recently back from deployment, her hand resting gently over his. They were watching a newscast, this one quieter, more local. The anchor was reporting on new legislation being proposed in California. Mandatory bias training for all officers, and a pilot program to include restorative justice protocols in every school district across the state. One of the slides behind her read, "Inspired by the Stockton incident." Nathaniel shook his head gently. "Wasn't an incident," he murmured. "It was a kid walking home." His wife looked over at him. "That's what makes it matter." He nodded. Outside, on the porch, Malik sat under the stars with a small group of friends. Jaden was there, and a few classmates from the Stand Tall school chapter. They weren't talking about activism, or policy, or viral videos. They were just being kids. Malik leaned back against the railing, the breeze brushing his face. "What if they forget?" one of the girls asked. "What if in a month it's all old news?" Malik looked up at the stars. "They might," he said. "But we won't." And that was the difference. Because change didn't come from viral videos. It came from what people built after them. It came from the choices made when no cameras were around. From the way kids like Malik stood tall, not because the world gave them permission, but because the truth was too strong to sit down. Sometimes, the most powerful statement is made in silence. When a child stands in truth and a parent stands behind him, not with noise but with presence, it echoes far beyond a sidewalk, far beyond a badge. Respect isn't given. It's carried. And Malik Jordan carried it with steady feet, a cracked phone, and the quiet certainty that he was worth listening to. Because he was. Because he is. Because we all are. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that truth speaks loudest when we stand tall for it. Subscribe to True Echo for more stories that challenge, inspire, and reveal the power of quiet courage. Comment below with your thoughts and let us know how you stand tall in your life. Your voice matters here. Always.